So starter shingles are another really important thing that people either do wrong or try and come up with a way to omit entirely. So they're really, really important. First of all, let's just be clear on the fact that the starter course should go all the way around the entire perimeter of the roof. And it's going to serve two purposes. The most important purpose is that the starter forms a barrier under the first shingle. Okay, so if we put the first shingle on, and here's like we've got two shingles staggered. Okay, this one's cut a little bit shorter. You can see that there's a 5 5/8 exposure here, so that this seam, okay, when there's another shingle that butts up to this one and water gets in here, it's going to hit this, continuous piece of shingle here. All right. We don't have anything. If we left out the starter and we just butted another shingle up to this one, there wouldn't be anything under here except for the felt paper. And over time, that felt paper would get burnt out in the sun, and you'd eventually have roof deck exposed. And then every 3 feet, everywhere you had a shingle joint, there would be a leak right there. Okay. The other kind of mission critical thing that these starter shingles are doing is they've got this adhesive bead on the bottom. And what you're going to do with this stuff is nail the starter shingle low, paying attention to where these shingles are going to land, because you don't want to have a nail right on the seam of those shingles, because if water gets in here and there's a nail right there, there's a direct path down to the roof deck. So you're keeping in mind where the seams of the shingles are as you're installing this starter course, and you're making sure that this adhesive bead is down towards the bottom, because all these shingles are nailed up here. In high wind areas, wind could get under here, and after a few years of blowing that shingle around, it'll just break and it'll snap off. Okay, but if we nail the starter course down low, then this adhesive bead heats up and glues itself to this shingle, and then this shingle is glued down to the roof since the starter course is nailed down low. Okay, and then the same thing on the rake. We're going to nail close to the rake edge, adhesive bead out so that this melts and adheres to the starter course. So one thing that's been very frustrating for me is that the starter course and the shingles are different lengths. So if you start out planning on having a stagger, a 5 5/8 stagger, the shingles will eventually catch up to the starter course. So if you go ahead and put all your starter course on and you think you plan it all out, great. Eventually you're going to end up with a situation where the seams of the shingles are landing on the seams of the starter course, and there's the potential for leak right there. All right, here is another video about installing starter shingles. Recommend everybody come back and watch that. It gives you some good guidance on where to nail it, how to step it back and stuff like that. All right. When we install asphalt shingles, if we're just doing a gable end or something like that, we do what's called cutting a book. And so each one of these shingles, you'll notice, is offset 5 5/8, which is the same as this dimension here. Okay? This 5 5/8 setback ensures that as these shingles are butted together, all the seams are far enough away from each other that we're not going to have to worry about water migrating in and seeping its way over and getting between these seams. Okay? I always tell the carpentry class when we're roofing, if I see any tape measures out on the roof, I'm throwing them off the roof. Okay? And the reason is, since this exposure here is 5 5/8 already, and this is 5 5/8, we don't need a tape measure for anything. Okay? These shingles have a shadow line. And the shadow line is where it's double thick here and it transitions to single thickness here. And that shadow line is the exposure for our shingles. Okay, that's that 5 5/8 line. So if I were to put a course of shingles on and I wanted to cut my first shingle in the book, I would lay that shingle down perpendicular to this course, lay it down perpendicular so that the bottom lined up with the bottom of this shingle, and then I would make a mark right here at the shadow line. And I would cut that first piece of shingle off and I would set it aside. So I would have two shingles now. One shingle is 5 5/8 wide. I would set that aside. I'm going to use that later. And then the other shingle is a full length shingle minus 5 5/8. Okay, so if this is a full shingle on this course, that one I just cut is going to be 5 5/8 shorter. And when I nail that on, I'm going to create my exposure, my stair step. Okay. The next shingle I get, I'm also going to lay that perpendicular down on the roof. And I'm going to mark it at 1, 2 exposures. I'm going to mark it right here and cut it off. And so now what do I have? I have a shingle that's 2 increments of 5 5/8. And I have another shingle that's a full length shingle minus 2 increments of 5 5/8. Okay, and that shingle is going to go on here, and it's going to be 1, 2 stair steps shorter. I'm going to get one more shingle. I'm going to lay it down perpendicular to these courses, and I'm going to make a mark at 1, 2, 3 stair steps. And I'm going to mark that and cut it off, and I'm going to have a shingle that's 3 increments of 5 5/8. I'm going to put that aside. I'm going to have a shingle that's a full shingle minus 3 increments of 5 5/8. Hopefully this all makes sense. That shingle goes on, and then you go through your pile and grab the ones that you cut off, and you end up with this stair step here. Okay? And you put full shingles on from that point. Okay? You started out by cutting them shorter, and then you just put full shingle, full shingle, full shingle, full shingle on there. Once you've run out of shingles, okay, you get back to the beginning of your book at your gable end, you cut another book and you put those on. And I would say, so there's a couple things to think of when we're doing this. You don't want to have nails near the seams. Okay? We want to try and at least get 5 nails in each shingle. And we can put them wherever we want, as long as they're not where this next course of shingle is going to be. Okay? We want to be about an inch in from the end. I see a lot of people nailing these too far in. Okay? They're more than an inch from the end, and they start creeping out here, so that when we end up with a shingle, our next course of shingles, it sits right on top of a nail, and then we've got a problem. And I would just say, cautionary tale, the biggest problem that people have when roofing is trying to put cut shingles in the field, thinking that would be like an easy solution to some sort of problem they have. It just creates more problems because it messes up our stagger step for multiple courses beyond it, okay? And then we end up with seams on seams. All right. So usually what I like to do is I like to try and nail 3 or 4 courses all the way across on the eave. And then that gives me enough room that I can turn around and stand up on the bottom of the roof and then cut my book and nail, okay? When you first start off, you're kind of sitting down on the roof, you're hanging out over the eave edge a little bit. So I try and get myself a nice little platform thing kind of here. We want to use corrosion resistant nails, so hot dipped galvanized nails. Think about where every nail is going. Think about where the next seam of your shingle is going to go, okay? That's the most important thing. Right here, I don't know what's going on here, but this doesn't look right to me. See how we've got this nice 5 5/8? And again, not here. There's something weird's happening here. This guy maybe is a pro, maybe not, maybe he knows what he's doing. But at any rate, I would get nervous once I start seeing this really big exposure here, and I would kind of wonder what's happening. These shingles aren't going to stay straight. They're going to get a little wobbly and kind of bounce back and forth as you go. What you do is you carry on, as long as it's not horribly bad. Just keep working your way up to the ridge. And then when you get close to the ridge, stop, apply a full course all the way across the roof, and then measure down from the ridge, chalk a straight line, and you can straighten those courses out. So let's just say, for example, you run that course of shingles all the way out, and you measure from a course of shingles up to the ridge, and you get 75 inches on one side. Go over to the other side and measure it. If you get 76 inches on the other side, the 75-inch side is closer to the ridge, and we want to drop that side. We never want to raise anything. We're always trying to drop a side, because if we drop it, you're not going to notice it, and you're not going to create a bigger exposure on the shingle. If we create a bigger exposure on the shingle, we're going to see a different color on the shingle, and we're potentially going to expose some nails, okay? We don't want to do that. The other thing is, if we're an inch off or more than that, we don't want to try and drop the entire thing in one adjustment. We want to make a couple of adjustments. So if we're an inch off, I would say maybe drop one side a half an inch, chalk a line all the way across, shingle that course all the way across, measure again, make one more adjustment, chalk that line all the way across, and then you're back on. Shingle your way up, be on your merry way. Stop when you're about 3 courses down from the top again, make another adjustment, and just make sure that it's really nice and straight at the ridge. Because you're never going to notice the shingles not being straight until you apply the ridge cap, okay? And if you have, if you didn't make your adjustment, I've seen roofs before where there's a course of shingles that just disappears underneath the ridge cap, and the last course of shingles and the ridge cap aren't parallel because nobody made that adjustment. And you can't blame it on the roof. I mean, just assume that the roof deck is out of square. Make that assumption, and then it's up to you to adjust it to make it look right. All right. We've got 3, for the most part, different kinds of valleys that we're going to encounter. The most common one is this, the cut valley. And the way you would install this valley is you would run your shingles. I like to try and split them 50-50 on either side of the valley. You're going to run a course of shingles up and through that valley, all the way up on one side. And then you're going to come back on the other side of the valley and roof into the valley, and then later you're going to snap a line on that side and cut these shingles back. Okay, so you get this nice straight line, and then you know that these shingles are running up behind these shingles. Valleys need a lot of extra protection because there's an awful lot of water that gets directed into the valley. Okay, you've got 2 different roofs coming together, directing the water into the valley. Okay, it's like the storm drain of the roof. All right. An alternative here is the woven valley. I like the way these look, and I like that you're not cutting anything on the roof, and I like that it's a double layer on each side of the roof. The only problem with these potentially is that they end up getting really thick. You have to try and avoid using, if you have anything more than a 30-year shingle, you can't do it. It's just too thick. Even so, with these dimensional shingles, it almost gets too built up and it can look kind of bulky. But what you would do is you would be essentially working 2 sides of the valley at once, okay? You would do this, run a shingle halfway up one side, and then you would come back on the other side, run it up on the other side. Then you do the next course, run that shingle in. Okay, I guess I could do it over here. Run that shingle in all the way up. Do that one first. Run that one over. Okay. Then this one goes on, and then that one goes on, and it's weaving. It's like weaving a basket. Okay, we've all done that. We're probably weaving baskets right now as we speak. Okay, and one side goes up, one side goes over. Metal is one of the most common ways to deal with valleys. They make a special valley flashing with this ridge in the middle so that it's like keeping water from running over to this side. Okay, it's directing it down the center of this valley. And so what you would do is you would put this piece of metal down first and then run your shingles into the valley and cut both sides of the valley against that metal. What you want to do, it's really, really critical that you have enough coverage on both sides. Okay, if you run a shingle in and it just kind of ends right here, then that's a place for water to get behind and catch and potentially create a leak. Okay, so you want to keep your nails also way out of the valley. So just because there's so much water running down here, you don't want to have a nail head exposed where some water could get underneath that thing.